Welcome to Unveiled Confessions, where the most raw and shocking confessions are revealed. I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
I don't usually tell people about this because it sounds made up, but it happened, and it still makes me feel sick when I think about it. You know how dating apps make everyone seem kind of copy-paste? Like they all say they like going on adventures and chilling with friends. That's how I almost ignored this guy. His profile was pretty standard, nothing crazy, but his pictures looked decent and he lived not too far from me. We matched on Hinge and he messaged first. I figured why not? I wasn't expecting much, but he seemed normal. He worked in construction, liked football, into tattoos. His vibe wasn't over the top, which felt safe. So we set up a first date at a bar downtown. That night started weird but not enough to really notice. He showed up and he was taller than I thought he'd be. Taller and kind of quieter in person. But he was polite. Bought me a drink, asked questions, didn't overshare. The only thing that stuck in my head was the little tattoo on his forearm, some kind of snake design. I remember noticing the tail curled right above his wrist. I even complimented it. He didn't say much, just smiled like it wasn't a big deal. The date went fine. Nothing crazy. He walked me to the bus stop after, gave me a hug, and I went home thinking I might see him again. We did. The second date was at this little ramen place I liked. When he walked in, he looked different. Same face, same build, but his hair looked shorter, like he'd just gotten it cut. People change their hair all the time, right? I brushed it off. He was more talkative this time, more confident. Told me about a dog he used to have, about his job, random stuff. He made me laugh, which I wasn't expecting after the first date where he seemed so reserved. But then I noticed the tattoo. The snake. The tail didn't curl the same way. It looked like it was a little higher, like it stopped closer to his elbow. I thought maybe I was misremembering. Maybe the lighting was weird at the bar that night. Still, something about it made me stare longer than I should have. He noticed and rolled his sleeve down and I dropped it. The third time is when everything cracked open. We met up at his apartment. That was my first mistake. He lived on the edge of town in this block of flats that felt too quiet, like no one else lived there. I almost turned back when I got to the door, but he buzzed me in before I could think. Inside, his place was tidy, which surprised me. We sat on the couch, ordered pizza, and put on some random Netflix show. He seemed off again, like a different person. This time he was distant, back to being quiet like the first date. He barely looked at me, just watched the TV. And that's when I saw the tattoo again. But now the snake's head was facing the other way. Like completely reversed. I froze. My stomach dropped. That's not how tattoos work. You don't just flip them around. It clicked in my head all at once. The haircut changes. The personality shifts. The tattoo never looking the same twice. It wasn't one guy. It was two. I don't know why it took me that long to realize it, but when it hit hard. I excused myself to the bathroom just so I could breathe. I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to convince myself I wasn't imagining it. When I came out, he was standing right outside the door. Too close. He smiled at me, but it wasn't the same smile I'd seen before. It was tighter. Controlled. Like he was testing me. That's when my eyes landed on a picture frame on his shelf. Two little boys, identical in matching football kits. Both grinning with missing teeth. Twins. It made so much sense I wanted to throw up. They'd been swapping places. Taking turns. One was quiet, one was outgoing. Different hair, different tattoos, same face. And I'd been dating both without even knowing. I sat back on the couch, my heart pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to make it obvious that I knew. If I ran, would he stop me? Would he call his brother? They must have thought it was funny. Or maybe it was some twisted game to see who I'd like better. I pictured them laughing about it when I wasn't around. Comparing notes. Picking apart everything I said or did. The thought of them both knowing little details about me made me feel exposed. Like I'd been on display without realizing. The rest of that night is a blur. I forced myself to finish the pizza, acted tired, and said I needed to get home early. He walked me to the door just like the first time. His smile never dropped, and I kept my face neutral until I hit the street. As soon as I was out of sight, I ran. I blocked his number. Deleted Hinge. I even stopped going to some of my usual spots for a while because I didn't want to risk running into either of them. I kept imagining them watching me, trying to figure out if I had caught on. And here's the part that still gets me. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of me walking down the street near my bus stop. No caption. Just the picture. I never found out which one sent it. I always thought I'd be the type to cook for someone first, not the other way around. That's what made this whole thing feel kind of cool at first. When she told me she'd made dinner and I should just come over, it felt different from the usual, let's grab drinks, or let's get sushi. Like, okay, she's putting effort into this, she's comfortable enough to have me at her place. That sounded better than another loud bar anyway. We'd met on Hinge. Basic back and forth, nothing crazy. She was cute, kind of artsy looking in her photos, always holding a book or coffee cup. She worked in retail, I think, though she didn't talk much about her job. Mostly she asked me stuff about myself. At the time, I thought it was nice that someone was actually listening instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of this older brick building downtown. Not too sketchy, not too nice either. She buzzed me in and I walked up the creaky stairs. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been standing there waiting. The place was normal. Surprisingly normal. Living room with a little couch and a TV. Plant in the corner. Kitchen smelled like pasta sauce and I could hear something bubbling on the stove. No weird smells, no creepy vibes. I remember actually thinking, wow, maybe this will finally be one of those normal dates people always talk about. We sat at the table she'd set up with 2 plates, some candles, even wine. She laughed a lot, mostly at little things I said, and I started to relax. She kept saying she was glad I came, glad I trusted her enough to come over. I figured it was just nerves talking, so I brushed it off. Dinner was fine. Pasta, salad, bread she said she baked herself. We talked about random stuff, TV shows, music, our favorite places to eat in the city. She was definitely more animated in person than over text. I could tell she was trying to impress me, and honestly, it worked. After we finished eating, she asked if I wanted to hang out in the living room. The air got chilly from the open window and I joked about freezing. She jumped up immediately and said she'd grab me a jacket from the closet. I told her I could get it myself since it was right there by the door. That was my second mistake. I pulled the closet door open without thinking. Just expecting coats, maybe some shoes on the floor. What I got instead made my stomach drop so fast it felt like I was falling. The entire closet was covered, floor to ceiling, with pictures. Of me. Not us together, not selfies from the night. Just me. Everywhere. Some were screenshots from my socials. Instagram photos, profile pictures, old ones I didn't even remember posting. But a lot of them weren't from online. There were blurry shots of me walking to work, sitting at a bus stop, coming out of a grocery store. Even one of me in my apartment window, which meant she'd been outside my building at some point. All taped to the wall like some kind of twisted scrapbook. I froze. My hand stayed on the doorknob, but my eyes were glued to the collage. And then I noticed the details that made it worse. A strand of my hair taped carefully next to one picture, like she'd saved it. What looked like a receipt from a coffee shop I go to, pinned beside another. Even my name scribbled in different colors of pen, over and over, filling any gaps in the wall. It wasn't a closet anymore. It was a shrine. I must have stood there too long because she came up behind me. I didn't hear her walk over, but suddenly she was right there, so close I could feel her breathing. I didn't turn. Couldn't. My mind was racing. How long had she been watching me? How many times had she followed me without me noticing? All the photos, all the angles, they weren't accidents. She'd been collecting me. I forced myself to step back, trying to act casual, like maybe I didn't just see what I saw. But she was staring at me, her eyes wide, like she was waiting for a reaction. Her hands were twitching like she didn't know what to do with them. The silence was unbearable. The normal apartment, the nice dinner, all of it cracked wide open by that door. I mumbled something about needing to leave early for work the next day. I didn't even sit down or grab my bag properly. I just shoved my arms through my jacket and made for the door. She didn't try to stop me, not physically. But she stood there, right by the closet, still staring, and I swear she looked disappointed. Like I'd failed some kind of test. I walked fast down those stairs, out the front door, and didn't look back until I was halfway down the block. My chest hurt from holding my breath, but I didn't care. I just needed to get as far from that building as I could. Later that night, I deleted Hinge, blocked her number, went through my socials and locked everything down, even made some accounts private that I never thought about before. But the photos she had, the ones not from my socials, those still eat at me. Because that means she was out there, following me around, taking them without me knowing. And I never once felt it. I haven't told many people this. When I do, they just ask why I opened the closet. Like it's my fault I found it. But I'm glad I did, because if I hadn't, I might have kept going over there, kept eating her dinners, kept letting her closer. And that closet, that shrine, there was no coming back from that. I should have known something was off the second he said it, but in the moment it just sounded like a dumb joke. You know how someone makes a casual comment and your brain files it away as background noise until later, when it blooms into something ugly? That's exactly how this went. We matched on Hinge after a stupid long stretch of swiping through nothing. He wasn't flashy, no gym mirror selfies, no flexing cars, just normal photos, a steady smile, works in IT listed like it was a neutral fact. He messaged first, kept the chat alive without being annoying, and a week later asked if I wanted to come over for dinner instead of doing another bar. Mostly I say no to at-home invites, but he seemed fine. He even sent a picture of the groceries like an embarrassing proof of intent, and that tiny performative thing made me think I could trust him. His building was newer and boring. Second floor, key fob, a plant in the lobby. He opened the door with a warm smile and the smell of garlic hit us the second I stepped in. He was making pasta, the kind of sauce that clings to the noodles, the whole place smelling like a restaurant. The kitchen was small but tidy, a little island, a cutting board with bread. He poured wine, settled me on the couch and went back to the stove. It all looked normal and I told myself to relax. We ate at a small table, 2 plates, gentle conversation. He wasn't trying too hard. He asked questions without slipping into interview mode. We talked about music, a dumb Netflix documentary, how he hated humidity. After dinner I asked where the bathroom was and he pointed down the hall. Last door on the right, he said, but then added offhand, not that door though. I laughed it off. Not that door, I repeated while picturing a closet with junk he didn't want me to see like everyone has. Normal people have weird storage spaces. I went to the bathroom and it was fine. Clean soap, that cheap hotel sink squeak. When I came back he was clearing plates and we moved to the couch. He put something on the TV, something that could live quietly in the background while we talked, while we finished our wine. Sometime after the show started he stood up and announced dessert. I put the cheesecake in the fridge, he said. He walked into the kitchen and I watched him go, then a faint, weird sound flitted down the hall. At first I told myself it was the building settling. Old pipes, a stray dog somewhere, but the sound kept shaping itself, scratchy, muffled, uneven. A voice trying to get out through a pillow. It rose and fell like someone whispering while crying. It wasn't the TV. It wasn't the microwave. It came from the exact door he'd pointed me away from. My skin crawled. I felt my pulse do a ridiculous, panic staccato. For a second I didn't move. Survival instincts do weird things. You freeze, you listen, you calculate. The sounds continued, a ragged, urgent whisper that made my throat fill with iron taste. I could almost make out syllables like someone pleading and the sound being swallowed by wood and drywall. He was in the kitchen for maybe 30 seconds. Less than a minute, but each second stretched. He came back with 2 plates of cheesecake, set one in front of me, sat down, and the sound cut off like someone flicked a switch. Complete silence. He smiled like everything was normal, slid a fork toward me. My hand shook so hard I barely held on to the silverware. The rest of the evening was an exercise in keeping my face from betraying me. I laughed too loudly when he said something funny, nodded at the right pauses, pretended to take bites. I asked questions, where he'd grown up, that small talk that fills time, and the answers sounded like they were coming from somewhere very far away. When he told a dumb story about a cousin's college prank, I forced a laugh and watched the hallway every 2 sentences. I wanted to leave, obviously. It's one thing to feel uncomfortable. It's another to have the sound of someone trapped in your host's apartment echo in your head. But leaving felt like an accusation. I didn't want to say, hey, that noise, what was that? In case he snapped and then I'd be in a stupid, dangerous position. There's this tiny freeze that overtakes you when something might escalate. Logic says get out, reflex says pick the moment that won't make the other person feel humiliated and violent. So I chose the least confrontational extraction. I've got an early morning, I said, standing slowly. He didn't seem surprised. He walked me to the door, said we should do this again, and hugged me like nothing had happened. I left with every limb light as air and every thought screaming. On the stairs down I found myself rehearsing how to report what I'd heard, what I'd probably, heard. Muffled cries from behind a closed door. Doesn't read well on police forms, does it? Might be someone locked in, actionable if you don't have proof? I told myself the sound could have been anything. It could have been a neighbor with a crying child or a TV left on. Rationalizations are a comfort when your gut is screaming. I blocked his number the next morning. Deleted Hinge again because the app felt like a place that had ushered this into my life. For a while I avoided that side of town, the little strip with his building and the grocery store where he'd taken that first picture of groceries. My friends thought I was being dramatic, until one read a thread in a local neighborhood group complaining about a late-night argument heard in that exact building. Maybe that was it. Maybe not. The neighborhood grapevine is an echo chamber of everything. I never saw him again, and that's not the closure I wanted. I wanted to know the truth, what the sound was, who was behind the door, whether anyone was hurt. But answers require courage, paperwork, and a willingness to make a simple late-night date into a police case. Instead, I have a memory that sits heavy and unresolved. The sound is a shadow now. It might have been nothing, and that doubt is a kind of cruelty. The worst part, in the end, is that I'll never know if I was close to pulling someone out of danger or if I narrowly escaped something worse. Either way, I walk a little faster past that block, and I no longer give an in-home invite the benefit of the doubt. I don't usually notice patterns in people. Most dates just blur together. Same kind of conversations, same small talk, same awkward pauses. But with her, the patterns were too specific. Too much overlap. We matched on Hinge, nothing special about her profile. She had pictures at coffee shops, a dog in one, and a bio about loving, authentic connections. We talked for a week before meeting, and she seemed easy to text with. Kind of dry humor, but I liked it. First date was at a diner. I ordered my usual, chicken tenders and fries. Nothing fancy, just comfort food. She didn't even look at the menu. She ordered the exact same thing, down to the side of ranch instead of ketchup. I thought it was funny. Coincidences happen. The second date was at a small bar with live music. We were talking about work and random life stuff, and I said something I always say when I'm stressed. It is what it is. She laughed immediately, like too quickly, and said it back to me word for word. Except it wasn't just that time. She said it 3 more times that night in different contexts, like she was trying to make it a shared joke. I brushed it off, but it stuck in my head. By the third date, it was harder to ignore. We went to a Thai place. The waiter came over, asked for our order, and before I could even open my mouth, she said pad see ew with extra broccoli. That's literally my go-to every time, and I never told her that. I felt my face heat up because it was too on the nose. She didn't even flinch. Just smiled at me like we were synced up. That night she mentioned a coffee shop I go to near work. Not a big chain, not the kind of place you casually name drop unless you've been there. I never mentioned it to her. Not once. She said it like she already knew it was part of my routine. I started paying closer attention after that. The more I listened, the more I realized she was recycling me back at myself. Little phrases I'd left in comment sections online, captions I'd written months ago, jokes I only ever made in group chats. She'd say them like they were hers. At first I thought maybe she'd gone through my socials way too deep, like backscroll stalker deep. But then it got weirder. Because some of the things she said weren't even public. They were things I'd only typed in private chats, things I'd only told people directly. And somehow she had them. It kept bugging me until one night I couldn't take it anymore. After our third date, I went home and started digging. I typed my own name into Hinge just out of curiosity, even though my profile was obviously me. And there it was. Another profile. Same pictures as me, but not mine. Slightly different captions. Stuff I never wrote but sounded close. Close enough that someone who knew me could make it up. The bio said taken, but seeing who notices. My stomach dropped. I clicked through, and it was like looking at a parallel version of myself. Posts about loving pad CEW, about hanging at the diner, about the coffee shop near work. Every detail she had guessed about me was written there, as if we were already together and she was building the character of me to fit her story. The craziest part? In one of the prompts I'm looking for, it literally said, someone who already knows me. That's when it clicked. She wasn't just dating me. She was catfishing as me. Using my pictures, my habits, my words, to build some fake version of us online. She had been running a whole relationship with me without me even knowing. I sat there scrolling through the fake profile, heart racing. The comments under her fake posts were even worse. She was responding to people as if she was me, bragging about how great my girlfriend was, posting inside jokes I'd never made, telling stories that sounded almost real but were slightly twisted. She had created a version of me that was already with her. Already committed. Already in love. And here I was, sitting in my room, realizing I was months behind her fantasy. I didn't sleep that night. I kept refreshing the profile, watching her add new stuff in real time. Posts about our dates, photos of meals we'd eaten, even small details like the brand of hoodie I wore. She had it all cataloged. The next morning, I deleted my REAL Hinge. I couldn't handle the idea of someone else pretending to be me better than I was. I blocked her number, stopped replying. But the fake version didn't stop. The profile stayed active. She kept posting about me. Weekend in with him. He surprised me with flowers. None of it was real, but to anyone scrolling it looked solid. And I couldn't do anything. Reporting it didn't work. Her profile didn't violate anything because the pictures were technically mine, just repurposed. It's been weeks and sometimes I still find new traces. Posts under my name that I didn't write, comments about a relationship I was never in. It feels like she's winning. Like she stole my identity, not just online but in real life too. Because the version she built, the fake me, is everything she wanted. And the real me is just the guy who figured it out too late. I thought I was just going to a chill housewarming. That's how he sold it. Nothing big, just some drinks, music, a couple of his friends hanging out. I figured, fine, it's casual, I'll show up, meet some people, see how he acts around his friends. We'd only been on 2 dates before this. The first was coffee, the second was a movie. Nothing intense. He was a little awkward but funny in his own way. Not overly flirty, more like a guy who was just happy someone said yes to hanging out. When he texted me about the housewarming, I didn't overthink it. People do stuff like that all the time. I got ready in jeans and a nice top. Nothing wild, just enough to look decent. He picked me up outside my place, said I didn't need to bring anything because there'd be food and drinks already. On the drive over, he was in a weirdly good mood. Like humming to himself, tapping the steering wheel. I thought he was just hyped to have people over. When we pulled up, the house didn't look like some party spot. It was a regular 2-story suburban house with a trimmed lawn and a couple cars parked out front. Lights on inside. Nothing sketchy. He led me up to the door and I remember noticing he didn't seem nervous. Usually when someone's introducing you to their friends, they at least give you a quick, "You'll like them," or "Don't worry, they're cool." But he didn't say a word. Just opened the door and walked in. The sound hit me first. Clapping. Actual clapping. Then cheers. I stepped into the living room and froze. It wasn't a few friends hanging out. It was at least 20 people. Older couples, kids running around, people dressed up like it was some event. Men in suits, women in dresses, champagne flutes in everyone's hands. And every single person was staring at me. I hadn't even taken my jacket off when he threw his arm around me and, with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on him, announced me as his fiancée. The room erupted. People shouted congratulations. Someone popped a bottle of champagne. An older woman I assumed was his mom was crying, actually crying, dabbing her face with a tissue. Meanwhile, I was just standing there, half in the doorway, feeling my chest squeeze tighter and tighter. I wanted to laugh because it felt like some sick prank. Like hidden cameras were about to come out and someone would yell that it was a joke. But no one laughed. They were all dead serious. Before I could even think of what to say, people swarmed. A guy shook my hand so hard it hurt. A woman hugged me like we'd known each other for years. His mom grabbed my shoulders and called me beautiful. Everyone kept repeating the word fiancé like it was some magic spell. I glanced at him, waiting for him to laugh it off, to say it was a joke, but he just beamed at me, nodding like this was exactly how it was supposed to go. They pulled us into the living room where there was a huge cake on the table. White frosting, gold letters across the top. Congratulations. The smell of champagne was strong, glasses already half empty, and I realized this whole thing wasn't spur of the moment. They planned it. All of it. I couldn't find the words. My throat felt locked. Every time I opened my mouth, someone else would jump in, asking when the wedding was, how he proposed, where we'd live. Questions I couldn't answer because none of this was real. I tried to pull him aside at one point, but he wouldn't break away from the crowd. He kept holding my hand like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. And the way everyone looked at me like I was already locked into their family made me feel trapped. I remember catching my reflection in a mirror on the wall. My face was pale, my eyes wide, but no one else seemed to notice. They were too busy toasting, hugging, clapping. Every detail was already in motion. His uncle gave a speech about how long he'd been waiting for this. His cousin asked if I'd wear her old veil. His grandma kissed my cheek and whispered how glad she was that he finally found me. The weight of it hit me in waves. They believed it. They all believed it. And if I said out loud that it wasn't true, that I barely knew him, that this was only our 3rd time seeing each other, what would they do? Would they call me crazy? Would they turn on me? I didn't test it. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I nodded when people asked questions. I let his arms stay glued around me like we were the happiest couple in the world. Inside, my heart was pounding so loud it felt like my ears were buzzing. Eventually, I said I needed the bathroom just to get a second alone. I locked the door and leaned against the sink, trying not to shake. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from him. It just said, "Don't leave." That was it. 2 words. I don't remember much after that. I plastered the smile back on, stayed long enough that it didn't look suspicious, and finally managed to get him to drive me home. He kissed my cheek before I got out of the car like nothing weird had happened. Like we'd really just been engaged in front of everyone we loved. The next morning I blocked his number. Deleted Hinge again. But I'll never forget the way that whole room looked at me, like I was already part of their family, like I'd walked into a role they'd been saving for me all along. And the worst part? Somewhere in that house, in a box or a photo album or a group chat, I'm probably still the fiancé. When someone says family gathering, you picture food, chatter, kids running around, maybe an uncle telling bad jokes. That's what I had in mind when she invited me. Nothing too intense. We'd been out a couple of times, both pretty low-key. Coffee once, burgers another time. She wasn't overbearing, not super flirty either. Just kind of normal. So when she asked if I wanted to tag along to her family thing, I figured it was casual. I dressed casual too. Jeans, sneakers, a hoodie. I even joked in my head that I'd probably look overdressed compared to whatever cousins and siblings she had. The direction she gave me led to a church. That should have been my first red flag. But people rent out church halls for stuff all the time. Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries. I pushed the weird feeling down and walked in. The second I stepped through the doors, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a party. It was a funeral. Rows of people in black. Flowers lined up by the altar. A framed photo of an older man surrounded by candles. Everyone quiet, heads down, hands folded in their laps. And me, standing there in a hoodie and sneakers, sticking out like a sore thumb. I turned, ready to bolt, but she appeared out of nowhere, grabbing my arm with this look like I'd finally arrived. She pulled me forward before I could say anything. My brain was scrambling for explanations. Maybe she'd meant memorial, not gathering. Maybe she forgot to mention the detail that someone died. But then she opened her mouth and everything got worse. She introduced me. Loud enough for people in the front row to hear. Called me her boyfriend. Not just boyfriend, her long-term boyfriend. The one the deceased had apparently adored. Heads turned. Dozens of eyes landed on me. I felt my face burn hot. People nodded, smiled softly at me, some even mouthed thank you, like I was supposed to be there. I wanted to correct her, to say this was only our third date, that I barely knew her. But the weight of all those stares pinned me down. Every face expected me to go along. She leaned close, still gripping my arm tight, and guided me to a seat near the front. I sat down stiff as a board, hands in my lap, heart pounding. I kept waiting for someone to call me out, to say they'd never seen me before. But no one did. They just accepted it. During the service, people spoke about the man in the photo. Stories about his kindness, his hobbies, how much he loved his family. A couple of times, someone even glanced at me while saying how much he'd wanted to see her happy, how glad he'd been she finally found the right one. I felt trapped inside a role I didn't audition for. Every detail was suffocating. Her aunt squeezed my hand during a prayer. A cousin leaned over and whispered that he remembered hearing about me. His words made my skin crawl because they couldn't be true. The longer I sat there, the harder it was to keep my breathing steady. My hoodie felt too bright, too wrong against the sea of black. My sneakers squeaked on the tile every time I shifted. I wasn't part of this world, but they had already cast me in it. After the service, everyone moved into a reception hall for food. Tables covered in sandwiches, coffee urns, trays of cookies. The whole place buzzed with quiet conversation. And every group we walked past, she stopped to introduce me again. Each time the same line, her boyfriend, the one the deceased always liked. People nodded warmly, shook my hand, patted my back. They spoke to me like I'd been part of her life for years. Like I'd been in this family all along. I couldn't eat. My stomach was knotted too tight. She kept piling food on my plate anyway, smiling at me like we were living out some perfect moment together. I tried to get a second alone, but she stayed glued to me, always one hand on my arm or back, like she was afraid I'd vanish. At one point, her mother came over, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. She whispered that her late father had always said she deserved someone steady, someone real. She said I was exactly who he'd been talking about. I couldn't even respond. My throat locked up. The whole thing blurred together after that. Faces, hugs, people thanking me for being there. Every thank you felt like a weight crushing me further down. By the time it was over, I felt like I'd been swallowed by their family story. She walked me back to my car, smiling the whole way, acting like nothing strange had happened. Like I hadn't just been paraded in front of an entire grieving family as someone I wasn't. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. The smell of flowers clung to my clothes. I blocked her number the next day. Deleted the app again. But sometimes I still think about the look in her eyes when she introduced me. It wasn't panic or a mistake. It was pride. Like she'd been waiting for that moment all along. And I still wonder how many people in that room will remember me years later as the boyfriend who meant so much to someone I never even met. I've had my share of weird dates, but this one sticks with me in a way that makes my stomach knot up every time I think about it. Not because it was loud or dramatic or dangerous in the obvious ways. No, it was quiet, calm. And that's what made it so terrifying. It started like most matches on Hinge. The endless swiping, the dead-end conversations, the guys who thought WID was an acceptable opener. When his profile popped up, it felt like a break in the monotony. His pictures were normal. Not overly curated, not the cringy gym selfie type either. Just normal. A hiking shot, a family barbecue, him holding a coffee cup. His prompts were simple, not funny enough to stand out but not offensive either. Sick. And that was the theme with him. Sick. Middle ground. He wasn't overflowing with charisma, but he wasn't awkward. He asked what I did for work, what shows I liked, what my go-to comfort food was. Standard small talk. He didn't push for anything too fast, didn't make me uncomfortable. Honestly, he was kind of forgettable, but in the world of dating apps, forgettable sometimes feels like a relief. That's why I said yes when he asked me out. First date was a bar, second was sushi. They were fine. He was fine. I never left thinking I was head over heels, but I didn't have any red flags either. So when he suggested a third date, I figured, why not? But then he said it. Instead of a restaurant, instead of a movie or bowling or the standard, come over for takeout, he suggested dinner at his mom's house. At first, I thought he was joking. Who brings someone they've known for 2 dates to their mom's place? I laughed, waiting for him to crack a smile. But he didn't. He doubled down. Said his mom loved meeting new people. Said she was the best cook in town. He framed it like this wholesome, family-oriented thing. I should have said no. I know that. But something in me rationalized it. Maybe he's just close to his mom. Maybe it'll be awkward but harmless. After all, how bad could roast chicken and a little small talk be? The house was in a normal neighborhood. 2-story, beige siding, porch light glowing. Flower pots on the steps, a welcome mat. The kind of house you'd see on a postcard. I parked at the curb, sat in my car for a second hyping myself up. It's just dinner, I muttered to myself. Normal people live here. Normal things happen here. She opened the door before I even knocked. His mom. Like she'd been standing right there waiting for me. Her smile stretched too wide, arms already open for a hug. She embraced me like I was family, like I'd been there 100 times before, not a stranger on a third date. Inside it smelled like garlic and roast chicken. Candles flickered on side tables. Family photos lined the hallway. Him as a kid in a baseball uniform, his parents at some tropical beach. Everything looked perfectly cozy, staged even. And there he was in the living room, grinning like this was all completely normal. The table was set for 3. Fancy 2, cloth napkins, real silverware, candles. We sat down, and at first it was exactly what you'd expect. She asked me about my job, my hometown, what hobbies I had. She nodded, smiled, laughed at the right places. He barely said a word, just ate fast and watched us like a spectator. Then the shift happened. She asked me if I had regular cycles. Just like that. Fork in her hand, chicken on her plate, completely calm. My brain stuttered. I thought I'd misheard, so I laughed nervously. But she didn't blink. She just waited for an answer. Before I could find words, she kept going. She asked if I'd ever been pregnant. If I was healthy. If I'd be willing to undergo medical testing. The air seemed to thicken around me. I glanced at him, waiting for him to shut it down, to say she was out of line. But he didn't. He just nodded like every question made perfect sense. I tried to smile, tried to brush it off, but my hands were trembling under the table. I muttered something vague, hoping she'd pivot back to safe topics. Instead, she leaned in closer. Her eyes locked on mine like she was studying me under a microscope. She asked if I drank, if I smoked, if I had any hereditary conditions in my family. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't small talk. This wasn't a quirky mom being nosy. She was interviewing me. My heart thudded against my ribs. I pushed chicken around my plate, appetite gone, while she scribbled notes on a small pad she pulled from her cardigan pocket like it was completely normal. Then she said it. The word. Surrogate. She said it with a smile like we were already in agreement. Like the whole evening had been leading here. She talked about how grateful the family would be, how she and her son had been waiting for the right person, how fate clearly worked in mysterious ways. He nodded again. Silent but approving. His eyes didn't leave me. My throat closed up. It wasn't a question. It was an assumption. Like the decision had already been made and I just hadn't been informed. She launched into logistics, doctors, time frames, compensation. I didn't hear half of it because my pulse was screaming in my ears. He chimed in occasionally, adding details I'd told him on our earlier dates. How I liked running, how I rarely got sick, how I'd mentioned once that my cousin had easy pregnancies. He said these things like he was presenting me, like he'd been taking notes to prepare me for this moment. I felt trapped, cemented in that chair. My instincts told me to get out, but my body wouldn't move. So I smiled weakly, nodded at the right times, pretended to still be engaged. My fork cut aimlessly into a piece of pie when dessert came, but I didn't taste a thing. That was my moment. I pushed the plate away, apologized, and said I had to get up early for work. My voice cracked, but they didn't comment. She looked disappointed, but she didn't argue. He walked me to the door, still smiling that calm, steady smile like the night had gone perfectly. I didn't hug him. Didn't shake his hand. I just walked down the driveway as fast as I could without running, hands trembling so hard I almost dropped my keys. When I got home, I blocked his number, deleted the app, sat in the dark of my room replaying every second until dawn. It wasn't a date. It was an evaluation. And I wasn't seen as a person. I was a candidate, a vessel, a walking resume of reproductive health. And the way he just nodded along the whole time, like it was already settled, that's what still gets me. There's always that one date where everything feels a little too good to be true. That was her. From the first swipe, she seemed like the full package. Funny, smart, good-looking, easy to text with. She didn't drag out the small talk like most people do either. She wanted to meet up almost immediately, and instead of it feeling pushy, it felt refreshing. Like she wasn't interested in wasting time with endless back and forth. Our first date was at this taco place downtown, and it was perfect in a way first dates rarely are. No awkward silences. No fumbling for conversation topics, no weird energy. She was confident without being cocky, asked good questions, and actually listened when I talked. She made me laugh harder than I'd expected, and when the bill came, she didn't pull the fake, reach for her wallet move. She paid for the churros without hesitation and didn't make it weird. I left that night thinking I might have actually gotten lucky for once. The second date came fast. She invited me to her place for a movie night. Said she had snacks ready, that I should bring a hoodie in case I got cold. It sounded cozy, easy, safe. Her apartment building was the kind of place you imagine when you think of a clean slate, brand new, all glass doors and shiny tile floors in the lobby. It smelled faintly of bleach and fresh paint, like no one had lived there long enough to scuff the edges. When I knocked on her door, she opened it immediately, barefoot in shorts and a sweatshirt, her hair tied up messily. She looked just as good as her pictures, if not better. Casual, comfortable, like she wasn't trying too hard. Her apartment matched her. Spotless. Immaculate in a way that didn't feel like I scrambled to clean before company came, but it's always this pristine. Candles lined up evenly on a shelf, books organized by color, pillows fluffed perfectly on the couch. No dust. No clutter. Nothing out of place. I complimented the space and she just shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. We sat on the couch with popcorn and sodas, half watching some forgettable Netflix movie while making fun of how bad it was. She leaned against me about halfway through, light enough that I felt like I should put my arm around her. The atmosphere was warm, comfortable. Familiar in a way that felt unusual for a second date. And then I noticed the box. It was shoved just far enough under the coffee table that you wouldn't see it unless you looked closely. Plain wood about the size of a shoebox, with a lid that wasn't fully closed. I don't know why I even cared. It could have been anything. Board games, receipts, junk. But something about how carefully hidden it was snagged my attention. When I reached down to put my drink on the table, I nudged the lid just enough to peek inside. Wallets. Dozens of them stacked neatly, one on top of the other. Different colors, different brands, cheap ones, designer ones, old worn-out ones. All clearly used. Creased leather, frayed stitching. It wasn't some new collection. These were lived in. At first, I thought maybe she resold vintage stuff. People collect weirder things. But then I saw the IDs sticking out of the clear plastic slots. Driver's licenses. Credit cards. Photos of smiling faces tucked into the folds. Every wallet belonged to a man. My stomach tightened. I pulled my hand back like the box had scorched me. My brain scrambled for explanations that weren't the obvious one. Maybe they were props. Maybe she worked in film or theater or had a weird flea market hobby. Anything. But she saw me. Her eyes flicked from the screen to me and then to the box. And instead of embarrassment or anger, she smirked. A slow, deliberate curl of her lips that made the room feel colder. And then she said it. Don't worry. You'll get used to being part of the collection. Just like that. Come. Casual. Like she was commenting on the weather. My whole body locked up. The casual tone made it worse than if she'd yelled or tried to scare me. She said it like it was already decided. Like I was already hers. I laughed weakly, trying to brush it off as a joke. But her eyes didn't leave mine. They didn't blink. And in them, there wasn't a hint of humor. I sank back onto the couch, forcing my body to stay still, to not make it obvious that every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. She leaned against me again, closer this time, her hand resting lightly on my arm. My skin crawled beneath her touch, but I didn't flinch. The movie kept playing, but I couldn't hear a single word. All I could think about was the box. The names, the photos, the IDs. Men who had definitely not donated their wallets. Men who might have sat exactly where I was, drinking soda, laughing at bad movies. Men who maybe noticed the box too, but not soon enough. She didn't mention it again. Not once. But every few minutes, she glanced at me. Quick little checks, almost like she was measuring me, gauging how close I was to bolting. I made it through another half hour, though every tick of the clock felt like an hour. Finally, I forced a yawn, stretched, and said I was wiped from work. My voice cracked, but I played it off. She didn't argue. She just smiled, almost like she'd been expecting it. She walked me to the door. Hugged me goodbye. Held on a second too long. And in a low whisper against my ear, she said she hoped I'd come over again soon. When the door shut, I didn't look back. I walked fast down the hall, trying not to break into a sprint, my heartbeat thundering so loud I thought it might echo off the walls. By the time I got into my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys once before finally getting the door locked. The drive home was a blur. The streetlights streaked past, and all I could see in my head was that box. The wallet stacked with care. The IDs tucked into them. The smirk on her face. And that single sentence looping over and over in my mind, "You'll get used to being part of the collection." When I got home, I blocked her number immediately. Deleted the app. Sat in the dark of my apartment with my wallet in my lap. Fingers pressed against it like I was reassuring myself it was still there. But even now, weeks later, I still find myself checking my pocket more often than I ever used to, just to make sure. And every time I feel the rectangle of leather against my thigh, that image of her neat little box flashes through my mind. Because if she was serious, and deep down I think she was, it's only a matter of time before my wallet ends up on top of the pile.